Welcome everybody. Today I am going to show you my process as I make this Sunstone and Amazonite necklace. First, I have laid out the two stones that I am going to use. Next, I wrapped bezel wire around the stone. I used a screwdriver to scratch a mark into the bezel wire so that I knew where to cut. This is my shop assistant, Fleetwood. I love this part of the process since I don't know exactly what the piece will look like yet. My intention for this piece is to use these two stones creatively in a way that captures the balance of sun and moon energies. I had to file every component of this piece before they were soldered so that they would join flush together. I applied flux to the bezels here so that the solder would flow. You can see that the crescent moon is made of two separate pieces of bezel wire. I did this so that the two tips of the crescent would both have a sharp edge. Safety first. I love watching the solder flow. I have to heat the entire piece continuously, not just where the solder is intended to flow, so that none of the components of the piece get too hot and melt. Next, I checked to make sure that the solder flowed thoroughly on these two bezel joints on the crescent. And I decided to give it a little more solder to ensure that it's well connected as possible. I then test fit the stones into the bezels to make sure that the bezels fit perfectly. I sanded the bottom edges of the bezel so that they will lay flat when it comes time to join them to the silver backplate. On this sheet of silver, I laid out the components of this piece so that I could begin to make measurements for the shape that needed to be sawed out. As I contemplated how this piece will look, I determined that I want some silver ball accents to be included. So I used some small pieces of silver wire to melt into tiny silver beads. These silver orbs will represent the planets and stars and other heavenly bodies that we see in the night sky. When joined next to the crescent moon and sunstone, it will make a more complete picture of what our sky has to offer us. With some tweezers, I sanded the bottom edges of the orbs so that they will lay flat against my silver backplate. I wanted to have even more silver ball accents, so next I gathered some silver wire to make even more. You can see how I can turn these pieces of silver wire into orbs with concentrated heat from my torch. The molten pieces will form a little liquid silver droplet, and once that happens, I have a mostly round orb to use as a piece of decor. I played with the orientation of my stones and my silver orbs on the backplate to determine what the shape of the pendant will be. This necklace is a manifestation of awe and wonder for the night sky. At its heart lies that exquisite amazonite, its serene hue reminiscent of the moon's gentle glow. It captures the mystique of our moon, which is obviously helped by its crescent shape. The accompanying sunstone casts a warm and colorful glow, a perfect counterpart for the amazonite. Next, I used a Sharpie to mark the shape that needed to be cut out of the silver sheet. Then I stamped the back of the backplate with a moon and sterling mark. I had to hammer the front of the backplate again so that it would lay flat after being stamped. I applied flux to the entire backplate. Then I applied solder to the parts of the bezels that will make contact with the backplate. I checked one final time to make sure that the stones fit their bezels perfectly. If the bezel did not fit and I soldered it onto the backplate anyway, then the entire piece would need to be scrapped and restarted. I had to be very careful during this part of soldering since everything is fluid and could easily shift around by accident. I had to heat this piece from the bottom so that all parts of the piece are being heated evenly. Once everything was joined, I quenched the piece. I checked to make sure that the solder joined together all parts of the piece like I intended. Then I put the piece in a pickle pot to clean it up. I snuggled Fleetwood for a moment while I waited for the piece to pickle. Then it came back out of the pickle pot. I sawed the edges off of this piece to fine-tune the ultimate shape of the pendant. I filed the edges of the piece so that they are nice and smooth with a variety of files. Next, I made the bail that will hold this pendant to its chain. I bent the bail into a shape that I like with some silicone pliers. I hammered the bail with my favorite antique ball peen hammer to give it some unique texture. I then filed the tips of the bail to make sure that it will sit flush against my back plate. Back into the pickle pot. While the piece pickled, I took a moment to measure out the chain. Soldering around the chain takes a delicate touch with the flame because I do not want to accidentally melt the tiny chain links or the clasps. Next, I cut out some jump rings that will attach the bail to the chain. After putting the pendant onto the chain, I then added the second half of the clasp onto the chain's tip. I inspected the piece carefully since this was my last opportunity to do any heat-related tasks that needed to be done. Then I polished the piece for a very, very long time. Thanks to the magic of editing, you won't need to see how long the polishing actually takes. This shot shows the amount of silver dust that is thrown into the air while polishing. That is why I always wear a respirator or bandana while polishing. Then I applied a chemical patina to the piece to give it some black shadows. This clear chemical makes an instant chemical reaction to the silver when they touch, so it looks like I'm applying black paint. Finally, I got to set the stones, which might be one of my favorite parts of the process because I can now see the piece fully materializing into its final form. I checked the sunstone from both angles to see which side would show more flash in the stone. Look at that awesome sunstone. The sunstone with its fiery brilliance radiates warmth and vitality, mirroring the life-giving energy of our own sun. I started on my oval sunstone and used the bezel rocker to bend the silver bezels over the edge of the stone evenly from all directions. I used my finger to make sure that the stone was snug inside of its bezel. Next, I moved back to the polishing tool to take away some sharp edges from the bezel on the crescent. I want to prevent any sharp edges from snagging on the wearer's clothes or scratching skin. Then I used the buffing block to wipe away the patina that was applied to the surfaces of the piece, so that the black shadows are left only in the edges that surround each element on the necklace. I gave it a final check to make sure that all of the elements are polished and complete. And here it is. You can find this necklace on my website, elementalmoonarts.com, and there's so much more to be seen there, so please go take a look around. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the creation of this one-of-a-kind sterling silver necklace. May it serve as a reminder of the magic that surrounds us, and may it inspire you to reach for the stars. Until next time, may your adventures be as infinite as the cosmos itself.